We begin with some big developments in the Middle East this morning. Hamas has agreed to a ceasefire deal that's been put forward by Egypt and Qatar, but Israel has indicated a deal is still a long way off. People gathered outside Al-Aqsa Hospital in the besieged enclave, cheering the news of a potential ceasefire.
Israel says it will send a delegation to negotiate, but the proposal from its perspective is far from its essential demands. Israel is pushing ahead with its planned assault on the southern Gazan city of Rafah, having ordered some 100,000 people there to evacuate. More from our Middle East correspondent, Eric Torczyk.
We know what Hamas has told us, which is that this is a three-phase proposal, each phase lasting 6 weeks. And Hamas says that the United States has guaranteed that in the second phase there will be a pathway to end the war permanently. And we take that to mean that there will be a pathway towards a full Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. What we don't know is how many hostages that Hamas is holding will be released from Gaza in each phase, and how many Palestinian prisoners held in Israel will be released back to Gaza. Those details are apparently still to be worked out. This is being described as a framework agreement, which means that Hamas has agreed to a ceasefire in principle, with those key details still to be worked out in negotiations. It's potentially a huge development. It is the first time since November that Hamas has agreed to a ceasefire. It also giving that in principle agreement to release the hostages and move towards ending the conflict is a potentially massive step. You saw the reaction from Palestinians. They believe this is a pathway to end the fighting, but it really depends now on if they can get an agreement from the Israeli side. Already there are some Israeli commentators close to the government complaining that this deal doesn't look like the one that Israel put forward and that has been on the table before Hamas for a couple of weeks. That indicates Israel might be looking for some wriggle room to reject the deal. There are key members of the Israeli cabinet whose response tonight so far has already been quite negative, and they have previously threatened those ministers in the right-wing government to leave the government and essentially blow up the government if it was to accede to a deal that would end the fighting. Israel's cabinet has said it intends to proceed with the Rafah offensive, as you mentioned, regardless of any ceasefire deal. And just a short while ago, there were reports of a bombardment in the eastern parts of Rafah. So Israel's military says it is continuing with its operation and it is attacking parts of Rafah as we speak.
Eric Torczyk there. Well, diplomatic tensions with China have resurfaced after an Australian Navy helicopter was targeted by flares on international waters. The Albanese government has condemned the weekend incident as dangerous and unprofessional. To discuss what happened, the ABC's defence correspondent Andrew Green joins us now. Andrew, talk us through what went on.
Lisa, on Saturday it's emerged that an Australian warship, HMAS Hobart, was operating in the Yellow Sea off the coast of South Korea as part of a UN mission to enforce sanctions against North Korea. The Defence Department overnight has released a statement confirming that a Navy helicopter, a Seahawk, had taken off from HMAS Hobart and was then intercepted by the Chinese Air Force. A J-10 aircraft intercepted the Navy Seahawk and then released flares in its flight path within several hundred metres, we're told, and the pilot of the Australian aircraft had to take emergency evasive action to avoid what was considered a possibly catastrophic situation. So very serious what's occurred in international waters over the weekend while Australia was taking part in a UN mission.
And what's been the response, Andrew?
Well, immediately from the Defence Minister, there's been condemnation. Richard Marles has described this as both unprofessional and unsafe. He says that message has been conveyed to Beijing via diplomatic channels. The opposition leader, though, this morning, Peter Dutton, as a former Defence Minister, says he fears for the lives of Australian personnel given China's increasingly aggressive and assertive behaviour in the Indo-Pacific. He says that Australia's Prime Minister should raise this directly with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. As for China, we're yet to hear any formal response, though questions have been put by the ABC to China's Foreign Ministry and to the embassy here in Canberra.
Yeah, and it certainly comes at a time of particularly heightened tensions, I guess is the best way to put it.
Absolutely. Just last week we saw the defence ministers of Australia, the United States, Japan and the Philippines gathering in Hawaii to discuss this very issue. They resolved to cooperate more and to particularly help the Philippines as it deals with the Chinese military incursions into waters it claims as its own. Australia says it will be providing as much support as it can and training closely with the Philippines. And just last week, the ABC reported on a recent confrontation between the Australian Navy chief and his Chinese counterpart over that incident back in November where a Chinese warship deployed a sonar while Australian divers were in the water. That too, back in November, occurred during a UN mission in international waters.
Andrew, thanks for bringing us up to speed on all of that.
OK, let's take you back to the Met Gala whitish cream carpet in New York, and there we see the wonderful, the fabulous Greta Gerwig, the director of Barbie, with friends there on the red carpet. So many A-listers there arriving for what is a key event in that city, both for charity, fundraising purposes and, of course, lots of wonderful fashion. We'll go back there over the course of the next hour. Here is Emma with the rest of your morning's news now.
Thanks, Michael. 3 more men allegedly involved in the Wakeley church riot have been arrested and charged after raids on properties across Sydney. It takes to 14 the number of people so far charged over last month's violent scenes outside the Assyrian Orthodox Church, sparked by the stabbing of Bishop Maria Emanuel. Police had said they were searching for up to 50 people involved in the riot. The fate of stricken low-cost airline Bonza still hangs in the balance, with the fleet remaining grounded at least until the end of today. The Sunshine Coast-based carrier went into voluntary administration after it abruptly stopped flying last Tuesday. Accounting firm Hall Chadwick has been weighing up Bonza's future, but it's unclear if the airline will be restructured, sold or wound up. The home at the centre of a Northern Territory cold case, which captured global attention, will go under the hammer today. Paddy Moriarty has been missing since 2017. At the time, just 12 people lived in the town. His disappearance was the subject of HBO documentary Last Stop Larrimah. 2 years ago, the Northern Territory coroner concluded Mr Moriarty was killed, likely due to an ongoing feud he had with his neighbours. Funds from the auction will go to the public trustee. Opponents of Tasmania's proposed AFL stadium have labelled Labor's about-face on the project deceitful, saying it should have been announced before the upper house elections. Labor will now support the stadium being built, despite previously saying the multi-million-dollar project wasn't feasible. Leader Dean Winter says the stadium will create thousands of new jobs and apprenticeships. Former A Country Practice star Brian Wenzel has died aged 94. He was best known for his role as Sergeant Frank Gilroy in the popular Australian soap, which he played for 12 years, winning a Silver Logie in 1981.